Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I'm going to ask you the question that a lot of you have been asking me. Is lightfastness really that important? Well, you hear an awful lot about lightfastness. What does that mean? It means how much is your paint gonna fade? How much is your painting gonna fade if hung in the light, basically? So it's really important with watercolors since they tend to be a little bit more fragile. Their binder is not as durable as like an acrylic or an oil binder, so that's where you really tend to get these arguments. And especially work on paper tends to be a little bit more fragile when exposed to the elements, the air and whatnot. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit today. There's one thing that I think is very, very interesting, because people will go crazy talking about lightfastness, and then they'll go and spend $8 on one of these. This is a Copic marker. These are wonderful markers. They are not lightfast. Do you know what that means? You do a beautiful illustration, you hang it up on your wall, it's going to fade. It's not going to fade overnight, but it is going to fade. These are dye-based things, and whenever you're looking at dye-based colors, they tend to fade. So if you're looking at a dye-based liquid watercolor, that's going to fade, versus a pigment-based liquid watercolor, that's probably going to be lightfast. So it's really important to know what those labels mean when you're looking at your paint tubes. And I think right now I'm going to try to pull up a graphic on the screen of a paint tube so you can see it, and you will see there are lots of different information on a paint tube. You've got lightfastness ratings. Now here's where it gets tricky, because there are like 3 different scales floating around right now. There is the American scale, basically, which means a lightfastness rating of 1 is excellent, a lightfastness rating of 2 is very good, and a lightfastness rating of 3 or higher would mean it's fugitive, not recommended for artistic use. Then you have the British scale, the blue wool scale, which and a lot of British paint companies use the American scale, but you have the blue wool scale, which states rating on their scale 7-8 being excellent or equivalent to a US 1, the 5-6 being equivalent to the US 2, and then pretty much under anything a 4 and under is too fugitive to use for artistic purposes. And then some paint companies go rogue and they use their own system, which is like a 1 to 5 star rating, and I see that in I saw that on the Lucas paints, and I saw that on the Magello Gold and a couple others, I think. And their scale is 1 through 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst. So you've got to really make sure you're comparing apples to apples and you know what scale they're using. And to find that information out, if you go to a company's website, you can find like usually a printable brochure if you didn't get a brochure with your paints, and you can get all that information so you know what you're looking at. But if you're just standing in the store looking at a label, it is so confusing. Another thing you can find on the label is what pigments your paint is made out of. Generally, a single pigment paint is more desirable because it'll be clearer of color and it will be more true, more bright. And also, if you know that a color is made with 2 pigments and you already have those 2 pigments at home already, you know you can mix that. Oh, I just dropped my expensive marker. You know you can mix those colors. So so it really helps you know what you're buying if you can understand those labels on your paint. You can also see if it's non-toxic or if it requires special handling, such as cadmiums and cobalts and other paints that contain heavy metals that you want to be careful with, especially around children. And all that information is right there on that tiny little paint label if you just bother to look and if you can figure out how to read it. So what do you think about paint labels, lightfastness? I know if you're a fine artist, you don't want your work to fade, but if you're a designer and your work is going to be photographed right off the bat, what does it matter? If you're a card maker, do you need to have lightfast pigments? If you are a painter, should you not bother working with Copic markers because they'll fade? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I think sometimes we get so worked up in the science that we forget to enjoy the art, and I always want you to enjoy the art here on the Frugal Crafter channel. So give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and until next time, happy crafting.